Mansfield today on a Monday, and as usual, your business section brought to you by Capital Legacy, your #1 provider of wills and estate administration. A gorgeous day in Johannesburg today. I believe it's bucketing down with rain in the Western Cape on election day, so we'll have to see how that affects the polls over the next few days as the results start coming through. But let's cross now to Cape Town, to Chris Gibbons, who is monitoring not the elections, but a whole lot of other stuff that's going around the world. Chris, we're into the whole season of the talking season, really, starting with the first one in Rome, the G20. Were we there? Were we representatives? Was President Ramaphosa there?
Good morning, Jeremy. Yeah, that's a very fair question, given that this is supposedly a meeting of the heads of state of the 20 largest economies on planet Earth. The answer is no. President Ramaphosa was not present. He was absent, but I don't think that's surprising, given that he has a very important local government election underway today. Not to fear, though, we were represented by International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor. The president, not the only notable absentee, however, also missing leaders from China, Russia, Japan and Mexico. Although I should add that China's President Xi Jinping was due to address the meeting via video link. He's generally not very big on these international gabfests at the best of times.
You call it a gabfest. Does anything actually get done here?
Well, you know, that's also a fair question, I think. Meetings like this are supposed to symbolize the fact that we're all standing together, we're all one big family, we're all pointing in the same direction. But as you'd be aware, the reality is very different. America and China involved in a complicated trade war. The Brits and the French stitching each other up over Brexit and fishing licenses. The French and the Australians at each other's throats over the cancellation of a nuclear submarine deal, and so on. In practical terms, the hard work at these things is always done in advance by lesser officials, the so-called Sherpas, and it's left to the leaders just to make the big announcements. In this case, a deal between the US leaders, between the US and the EU to ease tariffs on steel and aluminium, which were imposed when Donald Trump was in the White House.
Okay, that's the G20. The really big one started last night, though, the COP26. That started in Glasgow in Scotland.
Correct. COP26, or the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, to give it its full and correct name. It's the 26th such conference. You may recall we had one in Durban some years back, COP17 I think it was, if my memory serves me. It's much bigger than a G20 meeting. Many more leaders from around the world will attend, as well as all manner of NGOs and climate change activists. Heck, even Greta Thunberg is there, so you know it's important. It also runs for 2 whole weeks, although the leaders will disappear fairly shortly after a big photo op with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Okay, once again, I have to ask the question, does anything actually get done?
Well, depends who you talk to. The politicians will tell you, yes, of course, it's all vitally important. But cast your mind back to the big accord announced after COP21 in Paris in 2015. That was supposed to herald a whole new world with global warming limited to under 2 degrees centigrade and so on. And it is a legally binding international treaty signed amid much fanfare by 196 countries. Since when? We have achieved very little indeed. To be quite honest, we're now hoping that we might possibly hold global warming to just under 3 degrees, not 2. The signatories are supposed to mobilize $100 billion to finance climate spending by 2020. Now they say, well, we might get there by 2023, or maybe a bit after that, and so on. And countries like China, India and South Africa still burning coal to keep electricity flowing. China, in fact, has just increased its coal burning by 10% to offset the global energy squeeze.
So what's in it for us? I mean, what are we actually hoping to achieve here?
Well, you know, for once, I think we're in a good place, and we talked about this to some extent last week. We need to shift away from coal-fired power, not least because A, the cost of renewables, solar and wind is dropping rapidly, and B, our coal-fired power stations are very old and very badly maintained. But we need some big loans to make the transition and to sort out Eskom's debt problems. The sums, viewed through South African eyes, are huge, but looked at through an international lens, an international perspective, they're not so big. Sorting South Africa out, to put it crudely, just the kind of trophy project that is achievable. We want to play, the funders want to play, and a big deal could be announced amid much applause at COP26. Unlike, for example, sorting out China and India's use of coal. Those really are huge problems, and it's uncertain whether either of those nations do, in fact, want to play. A South Africa deal probably wouldn't save the planet, but it could well make a decent contribution, and it might well keep our lights on.
Changing tack here, Chris. There was an article doing the rounds that Impala Platinum wants to buy out Royal Bafokeng.
Very much so, Jeremy. The two companies put out a cautionary to that effect on the JSE last week. RB Plat's share price jumped nearly 24% on the announcement. It's a deal that Implats has been after for a while. They've tried at least once before unsuccessfully. This time, though, Implats is sitting on a small mountain of cash, about 23.5 billion rand, so it may well go through. And if it does, it will create the world's biggest platinum group metals company.
On the subject of the world's biggest, Microsoft has just overtaken Apple.
Yeah, although it's more of a default, I think, by Apple than anything that Microsoft has done. Although, in fairness, Microsoft is up 50% year to date. And just for the record, when we say world's biggest, we mean that it is now, once again, the world's most valuable publicly listed company, with a market cap of $2.49 trillion, compared with Apple's $2.46 trillion. The core problem for Apple is that the Cupertino-based company delivered some weak quarterly earnings and its share dropped 1.7%. Core problem, Apple, get it?
Sticking with tech, I see that Facebook is changing its name to, is it Meta or Meta? I'm not sure. Meta, I would imagine by the spelling, M-E-T-A. What's this all about?
Jeremy, I'm not entirely certain that anyone apart from Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg actually knows the answer to that question. Apparently, and I'm quoting here from the Financial Times in London, Zuckerberg is placing a bold bet on his vision of the future, a techno-utopia where people are connected and live in a virtual universe, unquote. This, he thinks, will be the next evolution of the internet. Says Zuckerberg, as quoted by the FT again, by the end of this decade, or even by the middle of the decade, I would guess we're going to reach a point where our virtual reality devices will start to be clearly better for almost every use than our laptops and computers are, unquote. I gather that we would all have avatars of ourselves, we would exist in this place called the metaverse, and we would buy and sell things there to and from each other, with no doubt a slice of every transaction going to Mr. Zuckerberg. His critics say that much of this is just an attempt to deflect attention away from Facebook's ongoing image problems. It's taken a huge amount of flack recently over things like its inability to control hate speech and damage done to teenage girls over diet fads, etc. I suppose you might say that Zuckerberg hopes that things go better with Meta.
Whoa, put a copyright behind that one, Mr. Gibbons. You can make yourself some money. It's a big week for various economies, isn't it?
Coming up, very much so. Top of the list, the meeting on Tuesday and Wednesday of the US Fed's Open Markets Committee. This is the meeting held every couple of months, which decisions are made to raise or lower interest rates. It's always watched with microscopic attention, because as we all know, when the US sneezes, the rest of us catch a cold. But this time round, the meeting takes place under the shadow of rising inflation and the possibility that the Fed is going to start the process known as tapering. That's when it begins to ease up on its massive bond buying program introduced to help the economy at the start of the pandemic. The Bank of England meets later in the week to make a similar decision. That will also be watched very closely. Locally, we have a new vehicle sales for the month of October out today, and as the week unfolds, we'll get both the ABSA Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index and the HSI Market PMI. We were due to have the medium-term budget policy statement, the so-called mini-budget, on Thursday, but that's been postponed by a week because of the local government elections.
Okay, let's have a look at the markets to wrap it up. How did we do in October, Chris?
Not bad at all, Jeremy. I'm happy to report the JSE up 5% on the month. That's both the all-share index and the top 40. The all-share a whisker beneath, the top 40 a whisker above. That leaves the all-share up 13.6% year to date. Top 40 up 11.8% year to date. Okay, how does that compare with our peers? Well, in New York, the Dow is 17% to the good year to date. S&P 500 up 22.6, Nasdaq up just over 20%. In London, the FTSE up 12%. So we're about the same as the Brits, but I'm afraid nowhere near as good as the Americans at the moment. Gold and platinum both had a reasonable October, both down just under 7% year to date, though. On the currencies, a mixed picture again. The rand down 3.6% year to date against the dollar, up 1.2% against the euro, and down 4.4% against sterling. Brent crude oil, another good gainer in October, 7.9% on the month. That leaves Brent up 61.4% year to date. But finally, the superstar, of course, Bitcoin up 41% in October and 83% year to date. And no, I still don't own any.
Yeah, well, listen, you lucky fish, you're off to the bush. For how long are you going for? 2 weeks?
Just on, yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Off to Kruger Park.
Ah, lovely, 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 lovely. But you are leaving us for next week with a very interesting interview, which you're going to be doing with David Dyson. Just tell us briefly about that, Chris.
Former media lawyer back in the 80s, one of the founders of African Media Entertainment, moved into business from law, and he switched tack again. He's now become a writer, and he's just issued just published his second novel called The Good Nigerian. I'm going to be talking to him about it.
Look forward to that one, and enjoy your break. Nice one.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Catch you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, cheers. Chris Gibbons, our business journalist, right here on Mansfield Today, and that, as usual, brought to you by Capital Legacy, your #1 provider of wills and estate administration. We'll catch you tomorrow with Advocate Lance Brogden. He's going to be looking, I believe, at a very, very contentious issue. The whole thing between individual rights and rights of corporations or organizations. And he's going to be honing in specifically on the Quinton de Kock saga. So that should be an interesting discussion. We'll catch you then on Mansfield Today. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.